The luncheon remarks by Justice O'Connor, and she was fit and dynamic and tough, and it was a great joy, a lot of fun. And now we're moving into the afternoon part of the program, and we're delighted to hear in a few moments words from Deanna Oppenheimer, one of the world's authorities on international finance and banking. To introduce her is my very good friend and a valued member of the Board of Governors of the Andrus Center, Doug Oppenheimer, who in fact is the president and co-owner of Oppenheimer Companies, and he also is a member of the board of directors of a long list of companies, longer than my arm, as a matter of fact, including the Shakespeare Festival Board. He's on the American Red Cross. He has served on the Idaho Film Festival Board. He is a past coach and referee in soccer leagues. Didn't know that. And also in years gone by, this is the job that he had that I really enjoy most. He was film critic for KTVB. We would all like to be film critics. I think we are, but only Doug could have the camera time for that. And also a journalism major at University of Idaho, and he put that to good work, including writing a biography, a book called Sun Valley, a biography which I'm sure many of you have read. He has been invaluable, frankly, in helping to promote this conference. In fact, had it not been for Oppenheimer Companies, this conference would not have been a possibility. He's a wonderful friend, a great supporter. Please welcome to the podium Doug Oppenheimer.
Well, first of all, hasn't this been an absolutely amazing conference, thanks to our speakers and all of you here. And didn't David Adler, the bruised David Adler, do a wonderful, wonderful job? Well, you'll be okay eventually, David. Yeah. I am so excited that Deanna is here. Now, most of you have probably noticed that Deanna and I have the same last name. This is not a coincidence. Deanna is my sister-in-law. My brother John and Deanna have been married 29 years, which I think is a vivid example of John's brilliance and Dee Dee's patience and understanding. Deanna grew up in a small farming community about 45 miles from here, Parma, Idaho. I've known Deanna since she was in college, where she and John met. So I've known Deanna, Dee Dee as our family calls her, a very long time. And I truly marvel at her amazing accomplishments. Just about everything Deanna does is outstanding, and everything she sets her mind to, she achieves, with a couple of tiny, minor exceptions. For example, when she was 17, she was not selected to be Parma High School's homecoming queen. I personally feel the contest was rigged. Deanna doesn't like to talk about it. Ever. One other little glitch. Her baseball skills really need work. I saw her throw out the first pitch at a Chicago Cubs baseball game to a sold-out crowd. Her pitching skills need work. Her curve doesn't curve. But her fastball has laser-like speed and goes really not very far at all. But I digress. Deanna's first job out of college was working for Sunset Magazine. When she got her first business cards, Dee Dee Watson became Deanna Oppenheimer, or Deanna Watson, and her career was off and running. In 1985, Deanna started working for Washington Mutual, Her first job there was one step above a teller. When she left Washington Mutual in 2005, she was president of consumer banking. If Deanna saw a glass ceiling, she viewed it as her own personal skylight. From there, she was recruited by Barclays, where she served as CEO for UK retail and business banking, which consisted of over 30,000 employees. From 2005 to 2011, Deanna split her time between London and Seattle, a true globetrotter. When Deanna left Barclays, she was chairman of global banking for Barclays. She is now founder and CEO of Cameo Works, a global retail and financial services advisory firm. But it doesn't stop there. She also serves on a number of boards, including Tesco, the world's third largest retailer, NCR, Paris-based AXA, the second largest insurance provider in the world. She jets 3 or 4 times a month from Seattle to Paris to London. The woman simply doesn't understand the meaning of jet lag. Deanna also advises companies like UST Global, Bain & Company, Brooks Sports. Simply amazing for someone from Parma, Idaho, or from anywhere for that matter. But perhaps most importantly, and this is not even remotely objective, but very, very accurate, Deanna has unbelievable balance in her life. She possesses perspective, inspiration, passion, punctuated with humor, and an innate ability to have fun and enjoy the process. Deanna genuinely exhibits these attributes in her professional life, but she also generously shares these talents in her personal life. So, ladies and gentlemen, a family role model, water ski instructor, world traveler, poached egg expert, wonderful wife, mother and aunt, my inspiring sister-in-law, Deanna Oppenheimer.
Well, I have to say, it is a pleasure to be home. And never, ever in my life have I ever gotten such a warm and loving introduction. So thank you very much, Doug. I do want to make one clarification. My pitching coach was Doug. Now, I have to tell you, I have had the privilege, as many of you have, to have had the opportunity to get to speak in a lot of different venues, a lot of different forums. But it is really daunting for a couple of reasons to be here today. The first is when the entire second row is your family and related to you. That is, on the one hand, very supportive. So if I really crash and burn, I know they'll give me a standing ovation. But on the other hand, they know really all the truth behind what you're saying. So that will keep me honest. But the second thing is, it's an incredible honor to be here with the speakers that you have heard and you're going to hear over these 2 days. From authors to astronauts and Justice O'Connor. You just don't get to be in venues and places with these people. And so really, really take this as a privilege and an honor and a call to your personal action to take something away from it, because this does not happen every day. So I am extremely privileged and honored to get to be addressing you today. Now, I do also have to say that being here at Boise State University, and indeed in Boise, and with the Andrus Center, reminds me of the first time I met Governor Andrus. And that was when I was in high school, and I was a page coming up from the big town of Parma, Idaho. I was a page in the legislature. And I think it was Governor Andrus's practice to take time from his busy gubernatorial schedule and to actually take the pages out to lunch. And so 12 of us were sitting in this restaurant in a big square table with him sitting right in the center, And he went around and he took a placemat, a paper placemat, turned it over at his place, and he took out his pen, and he asked that each of us introduce ourselves. And we did. So we each gave a little bit about who we were, what we were interested in school, where we were from, went around, and at the 12th person said, "Thank you very much," turned the placemat over, and then he proceeded to carry on a conversation with all 12 of us where he knew each and every detail about every person, what they had said, what was important to them, and nobody sat there and thought, "Wow, he's a really important guy." It was, "This governor makes me feel like the most important person ever in the room." And he really, really epitomized not only the greatest conversationalist of all time for me, but my mother-in-law, Jane Oppenheimer, one of her great old adages, which is God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And again, Governor Andrus, thank you for that and so many things that you've made a part of my life. Now today, I'm going to highlight a series of firsts, and that's going to be kind of one of the themes that we have here. First, through learnings from my personal and professional life, but I'm also kind of weaving in a lot of what you've heard this morning. So I'll tell a little bit of background and a little bit about me, but what I'm really going to be doing is using that in how that kind of comes together for what you might do taking from here today. Now, in Parma, Idaho, I also have to say we had a first there. I am pleased to report that I am the relative of 2 mayors of Parma, Idaho. One is my dad, who is mayor, which is very cool and very exciting. But the second is my sister-in-law, Margie Watson, first woman mayor of Parma, Idaho. There we go. So it's great to have her here, and I don't think she was the first woman, but there was a long string of great women there, and so I came from where there were women leaders and women role models, which was terrific. And what I love about growing up in a small town, and you've heard a lot of those themes today, whether it was from Governor Andrus, from Justice O'Connor, is that there is a lot that you learn in small towns. You heard about independence, self-reliance. The one that it taught me is it's really not about what you can't do, but that rather you can do what you learn. And the reason is because people are desperate for just people to participate in small towns. There is none of this select stuff. There is like, can you walk, breathe, chew gum? And I thought my pitching skills were pretty darn good in Parma. Obviously, they were a little different when I was with the White Sox, but in a small town, you can contribute, you can try, and you can literally contribute to everything. And so I went on from a small town to a small liberal arts university, University of Puget Sound. I did upscale my city size, went from Parma up to Tacoma, Washington. And there, what was really interesting about the diversity of a liberal arts education is that you took specifically problems and things you learned in one area and applied them to another. And that was, again, a lifelong learning for me. You don't have to have each and every background, but you do need to see similarities in problems you encounter and apply them. Also, I learned the vital importance of communication, both written and oral. And finally, the importance of reinvesting in your valuable investment of your university, and how rightfully that we are here today for that. For my alma mater, I've been on the Board of Trustees for 30 years. I was the first woman and the first alumna board of the Chair of Trustees. And it is really important and vital for you students that while you're only here 4 years, maybe 5, as some of us have come through, but anyway, you definitely, it will be an impactful 4 years of your life. So remember it, carry on, but remember to give back to it, because it is a part of you that will go forward. Now, Puget Sound is also where I fell in love with my husband, John. I'm proud to say that our daughter, Jenny, graduated from there. She's now gainfully employed. We're very excited about that, aren't we, John? And our son is there and is graduating this spring, and indeed just got a job offer today, of which we're all excited about. And so thank you very much. We lovingly refer to Puget Sound as the family university. Now, I entered banking, as was mentioned earlier, in 1985. My brother commented at lunch, he said, "Wow, had I known it was that bad there, I'm amazed you got any job." And it is interesting because at that time, I would have been the only person that would have been really in banking as I went up through management that was not either in human resources or a teller. And I basically owe that to mentors. Now, for those of you who are men that are in this room, and also the women, as we heard earlier today, one of the most important things that you are going to get out of any type of a business career is a mentor. And even that means being one or being mentored, because it is a two-way street that comes up. My mentor was Lou Pepper. And Lou Pepper was a terrific guy. He's in his 80s today. I continue to take advice and counsel for him. But Lou actually transcended from mentorship to sponsorship. And this is a really important concept because the reason women fall out of big corporate jobs is not to do with their entry level, as you heard in the statistics this morning. They're hired now at about the same rate. It's not to do so much with their quality of work. They work extremely well, their education. It's all the other stuff of life that goes on. And it's what happens, as you heard earlier this morning, when you are making those tough choices of having children, having a family, having other interests. That's where women start to fall out. Now, my favorite Lou Pepper stories, of which there are many, and he actually wrote a book, so you can go on Amazon and check it out. Lou Pepper is the, and it was his favorite stories of looking at his life and philosophy, but how he really impacted mine. Was I enter into banking, I'm barely 25. And about 3 months into it, he goes, "I'd like you to give a presentation to the board of directors." Now, I was from Parma, Idaho. You know, we'd done everything. You'd always been asked to do things. I didn't realize that's a big deal. You're 25 years old, 3 months in a company, you walk in and they say, "We'd like you to present to the board." But Lou was doing that. Lou was identifying women with potential around the company and giving them lots of opportunities to grow and to succeed. As a mentor, that is crucial for what we must do. But he didn't stop there. I remember he walked in my office at one point, and I was pretty upset. And he kind of picked that up, and he said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, everything at work is fine." He said, "Well, what's wrong?" I said, "Lou, I have this weird kind of medical thing that's happening, and I don't know about that." And he said, "Well, who are you going to?" I said, "I just kind of called up and went into a doctor. We haven't lived in Seattle a long time, don't know anybody." He goes, "Oh, no, you're not going to any doctor. You're going to the quarterback of doctors, and we're going to get in and solve that and see what it's wrong." It ended up everything was fine, but he would do that on top of, "You and John are going to be at a level in your careers of where you need to be in the right clubs. So I'm going to sponsor you into private clubs. I'm going to help you make sure that you make the right choices for what schools, the children that you don't even have yet, but I know that you will have because you're going to be great parents, are doing." And so it is that idea of giving a support network around an incredible, comprehensive, holistic view of a person's life that has them move along. Now, I have to say, when I joined Barclays Bank in the UK, that was pretty interesting for a whole lot of reasons. First woman CEO of the UK retail bank. Barclays, the retail business for Barclays at that time was their second largest line of business. It was about 30,000 employees, about £2 billion after-tax business. It was a big business, but it was really important because it was in the home market. But the thing that was the most daunting to me was not only was it two countries kind of separated not only by an ocean, but a common language. I made a lot of faux pas in when I would stand up and speak about suspenders versus braces. Look that one up. It's a bad faux pas to have. And but the company, Barclays as a company, was actually 350 years old, older than our country. So it was a daunting task. And when I came in, it wasn't like you got to kind of fly in under the radar screen, much like what Justice O'Connor was talking about. When I joined, I was heralded by the Financial Times in Britain as the high-flying American woman brought in to turn around that sluggish UK retail bank, and by the tabloids as Barclays' mean retail queen. Come on, I'm a little girl from Parma, Idaho. They don't talk to you like that in Parma. So it was very, very daunting. And they did focus on the fact that I was a woman, and they focused on the fact that I was not British. So it was very important as you were paving your way at Barclays and paving those firsts to be looking around and figuring out what is important that I need to make sure I put my mark on this and not somebody who had preceded me. Now, in the midst of turning around the business, the global financial crisis hit, so what was originally going to be kind of a 2 to 3 year thing turned into 6.5 years. And in 2012, though, the time had come for me to come home. Our children had both gone through the American school in London, graduated from high school there. We're back here in the States, and John had been a yeoman at going back and forth, but it was time to come back. And so I went into the next phase of my career, which is something I would encourage all of you to think about. When I came into Seattle, I was like going, okay, my whole career has been being a big executive in global retail banks. Done it for nearly 30 years. Check out the Northwest. There are no global retail banks in the Northwest. And so I thought, well, this means I need to pivot. This means I need to adjust. I need to look at what are my strengths that I can apply to things that I want to do that need to be done in the marketplace. And I would say in this era of technology now, you have unlimited opportunities to do that. What I chose to do was gear up to Cameo Works, which is a boutique advisory firm. We bring innovation and a burn rate mentality of West Coast startups to the global scale of corporate leaders in New York, Paris, and London. And it integrates all of that career experience that I'd had before, but still affording me to live in the place that I want to be and spend a little more time with the people I love and want to be with. When I started out my career, I never set out to be a first at anything. I just thought it was really important that you tried to do the best at what you were given. And I guess when I looked at that, if I look back, what were the things that really helped that? It's a curiosity to love solving problems. It's a curiosity to love diverse people. And it's a curiosity to add more skill sets that keep you relevant and current. And if you have that, it's exciting. And people want to give you opportunities and they want to follow you for solutions. Now, I'll bet for all the firsts that I've been blessed with in my career, as I look out in this audience today, there are many, many, many more waiting to happen. And particularly for women. Because when all the firsts for women have been achieved, you'll never need a conference like this anymore in any part of the world. And as you've heard today, we are a long, long way from that. So I want to shift a little bit now, and I want to shift from me to you. And I want to talk about leadership, first in the overall sense of both men and women as leaders, because I've had the opportunity to work for, work with, and lead a lot of people in my career. And what's happening is there is now a real shift in society that is demanding a new leadership style and change. And the tipping point has arrived. We've talked about it at conferences like this a lot through the past decades, but it is here today. And there are two key things that are driving it. One is there is a radical shift of control from the few elite at the top to the masses. And that is really happening through the use of technology, as you heard briefly this morning. There's a vacuum of leadership now that happens when you are not in a command and control environment with a few people having all the power, There's a vacuum of leadership that requires new skills and new motivations, and indeed they are not in abundance yet in the marketplace. But those that we are leading are demanding it, because they are demanding that we have greater accountability and have more power now than ever at their fingertips to see whether or not we are doing that. New leadership requirements are changing the old school model, where success comes when those who are led feel empowered, inspired, and indeed led. It's not about the leaders. It's about those we lead. In the new school, the creative individual is replacing the old school mentality of the combative individual. The same can be said for a shift from the controlling internal culture to one that is more of engagement, particularly colleague engagement. And for external communications, it's no longer about I'm the corporation that's going to put out the spin doctor message. I better bear all, because it's all going to be tweeted and Facebooked and out in the environment quicker than can be. So I can't be in damage control all the time on my time frame. I've got to be in it real time now. Customers are demanding business on their own terms thanks to the smartphone, which has unprecedented information in the palm of our hand. My favorite statistic in the whole area of technology, and now I'm working with a lot more technology companies, is that since I came back from London about 2 years ago, 90% of all the data in the world has been created. 90%. 100% of all the photos that have been shared is astronomical now through smartphones, through tweeting, through everything else. The world has radically changed in the last 18 months. So what does that mean for leadership and accountability? Well, whether you believe this is a secular change, as I fervently do, or you think that it's just a leadership cycle of what's in vogue right now, there's mounting evidence that a new leadership values that are not cut from the traditional alpha male cloth are really required. But what does that mean? Whether you're male, female, old, young, new, big, small, whatever you're leading, it means the biggest change is to you, how you choose to lead in this environment. So traditionally, companies organize themselves vertically, and they basically are organized in departments and in divisions and in business units. And what happens, in my experience in working in a lot of big companies and with a lot of big companies, is they spend half their time then trying to go horizontal, to break down those silos by going horizontal. And that's what they spend a lot of time. It's a lot of waste in big corporations. Well, what's happening now is, as I call it, the diagonal has come into effect. The best innovation now of what you have to do to move, get fast, you heard the example from Amazon this morning, is they literally broke down the offices to be able to respond immediately. That means it's informal groups that have to come together. So my example was at Barclays. At Barclays, when I went back, it was amazing. You know, they had been around for 350 years, and the technology had been there for about that long, too. And so I had introduced internet banking 20 years before in Washington Mutual, and they didn't even have email. No email, internet, nothing out to the branches, nothing for the customers. So what we did is actually we created that, but we couldn't do it fast enough. So we had to take the people who were actually cutting the code, the people who were the executives, I convened them all together. We all sat together, regulatory compliance, everyone in the same room. Because that meant in 6 months we were able to get a product up, out, and dominated internet banking in the UK market for banks. So that idea of breaking down the silos and mentality, basically getting real authority to members, a get to be in the room versus a have to mentality, a true mix of supporters of both your superstars and your executives all together is crucial. But what's required? Well, it's pretty uncomfortable because you have to have real information sharing and transparency. You know, in the old world, information hoarded was power. In the new world, information shared is power. How many people do you think are out there tweeting pictures right now of that debate that just happened, that interview? I did. So I have to tell you that sharing, that giving up, that losing of controlling everything is absolutely crucial. And without a question, consistent up, down, and across the diagonal communication is important. Now, it's interesting, you speak about one of the things that really changed this for all of us was Facebook. I recently got a little note from Facebook talking about their terms and conditions when they change. You guys are all Facebook users, you know how this happens. Came in. So a corporation always sends you that out. They'd even gotten a little better, as most corporations have now. They'll send out and they'll say, and here it is in terms you can understand. We're not going to do it in legalese. They actually got a marketing person to write it with the lawyers. And but then what followed at the end of that? A lot of corporations aren't doing this. Every tweet, every comment was posted to every person who got that email about whether they liked their new privacy settings and what they were doing with photos or whether they didn't. So that idea of just letting all good bad share out there is crucial, and that is a lot of what happens with diagonal leadership. Because as Bill Gates has said, as we look ahead, leaders will be those that empower others. And it doesn't matter if you're a sole proprietor or if you have 50,000 people working for you. This diagonal leadership, those types of things that you need to encompass, definitely are going to be applicable to all. Now that brings me to women in leadership. So we heard a lot of statistics this morning. I think back when I was at Parma High School, there was one, that was Katharine Graham, one CEO of Fortune 500 company, Katharine Graham at the Washington Post. You heard today there's less than 10, still single digits. Now why is that? Well, you got to have a pipeline. I have to say I have been in a lot of panels like what you saw this morning. In Europe, Asia, the United States, many places. I have never been able to be on a panel as the CEO of, a big bank where they could field an ambassador and another major philanthropist and another major corporate leader and have all of us be women. This is the first time I've seen a panel where you can have that many women all together. Now, why is that important? Because that's the pipeline. You can't have a CEO of a Fortune 500 company pop out of running a small business. They have to have gone up through the corporate environment. Today, the Sheryl Sandbergs and many, many others like them are really leading the way. When I was at Barclays, we went from having in our senior management team less than 25% to 82% women. And that is because people like you are role models. Women will come up and follow other women and other diverse people. So here is some advice and counsel, much of what you heard this morning, but I'll kind of summarize it for what, if I were sitting in your shoes, I'd want to be hearing today. Back when I had just met Governor Andrus. There are 3 key things that are really going to make a difference in your career. And this is true whether you're in business, government, education, military, whatever. The first you heard about today is being authentic and demonstrate expertise. Now, what I mean by this is don't get there on the back of a quota. Bring real expertise and the real you to your career. As women, we too often underestimate ourselves, right? We attribute all the success to teamwork or the right timing. Don't undersell your work and what you can deliver. I was speaking at a conference in France, and this woman got up and she gave a great analogy. She said, I have a joke for you all. I said, oh, and it was all pretty much like this, pretty much all women in the room and a few very brave men. And she said, so there's 10 criteria for getting the job. The woman steps up, reads the 10 criteria, goes through her mind. Oh, yeah, I've got that experience. Got that experience. Got that experience. Yeah, I got experience of all 10, but boy, it's just not good enough. And goes into the interview and apologizes of why her experience is not good enough. The man goes into the interview, quickly scans down the list, sees that he has 1 out of 10 of the criteria, and goes through the interview and tells him why that is the only important criteria for this job getting done. So don't undersell what you can do. But by the same token, don't try and outman a man. Now, this mantra has really served me well since I began my career in my 1980s. And I have to say, I, too, was outfitted in one of those man suits. And Tracy, where are you? From that lovely store, I got my first silk bow tie. We all remember those, for those of us that were working then. And you walked in, and, you know, we were all trying to look like mini-men kind of going in. So today it's great. You don't have to do that. I'm up here in a pink suit. Even in London, I'd be in a pink suit, and that's pretty amazing. But enjoy your femininity. I do think there are a few key rules of fashion consciousness. You know, I think open toes and cleavage are great in clubs, not so good in the boardroom. I do think you also need to have some signature, what I call icebreaker topics that appeal to a diverse group of business leaders. Now, particularly, I found this was true when I was working with people in continental Europe. You know, women there are not nearly as advanced as they would be in the UK or in the US in terms of their careers. So I got very good at football. And I will say it is not Boise State University American football, because when you go global, you realize real quickly, we talk about World Series in our sports. Those are really American sports. Really, this is proper football, which is soccer. Arsenal is my team. And so I talked a lot about that with the English Premier League and in the Champions League on that side of it. Skiing, both snow and water, that I learned here in Idaho. Yoga, which interestingly enough is increasingly a very strong male topic that they're very interested in, as they're all kind of having back problems, I think is the problem there. And of course, the European fiscal crisis was always one of those topics. But the important thing here, you heard it earlier, you've got to be authentic. As Oscar Wilde said, be yourself, everyone else is taken. Now, but I do have to say it's not enough to be yourself. You can be the most charming, wonderful person that they'd all love to sit and talk about football, sports, or anything for the whole time. You gotta have real expertise. And in my case, I chose sales and a track to run, profit and loss, because in banking, the numbers speak for themselves. So if you're in a P&L business, you got P&L numbers, and they can sit any day and say, I don't like the color of her hair, I don't like the suits, I don't like the fact that she's not a man, but boy, she makes us more money. And so having a demonstrable track record is really important. And whatever your career, you are well served to document those results and then make sure in reviews, in a very factual way, you've shared those results. You know, we're all taught to kind of be, oh, now don't, just be really humble. Well, that's great. Don't brag about them, but boy, make sure somebody realizes what you've done. Because you can't wait for someone to recognize your performance if you haven't at least apprised them of what you've done. The second key thing, I think, and it's so wonderful for me today, because I can say this with great passion, is your family is your backbone. Together, you and your life partner can deliver great things, both in the office and outside of it. But you've got to approach it, because there are challenges and opportunities along the way. You've got to approach it as a team. And what does that mean in a team? If we're out there doing any type of team activity, we are going to capitalize on our individual strengths. Now, in our household, my husband, John, is in the hospitality business. If you want to stay in some of the best, most incredible places in the world, you'll choose his hotels. That would be www.columbiahospitality.com. Always welcomes family and friends coming in. But he understands the details of hospitality. Now, why would I then try and throw a dinner party? Really? I mean, you're just up for a complete failure. So in our home, John is the consummate entertainer. He's also a way better cook, because thank you for talking about my poached eggs. It's the one thing in the world I can cook, and I do them really well. But I'm not great at cooking. Now, unlike the earlier speaker you heard today, I love laundry. And I love laundry when I'm in the worst of business situations. Why? Because unlike a merger and acquisition that falls off several times, you never know where anybody is, laundry you know. It's dirty, it's in the washing machine, it's wet, it's in the dryer, you pulled it out, it gives you a big warm hug, you fold it neatly, you put it away, and it's done. It's a very nice thing, so I like laundry. But the point is, it's sharing. It's getting each one of you to pitch in. So the third thing that I would say, and my final words of advice here, is don't undershoot your career aspirations. You know, somebody told me once, I was kind of brought in that thing when they said, oh, well, you can have it all. Well, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. So I'm kind of making a lifetime of figuring out how you get it all. But what you can do is you can balance your work and outside world. And in fact, in the people I've managed, I want them to have an outside life because they're way better delegators, they're way better managers, they're way broader people. And that can be children, that can be interests, that can be a variety of different things. Because there isn't this magic fork in the road that says one-way family, one-way career. There is a blend. But what you must do is you must figure out that blend that works best for you. So in my case, coming back to Seattle, being able to do Cameo Works lets me do a lot more of this. It lets me go out and work with other people, connect other people, help other people figure out what is going to be their career path for either themselves or their company. But the bottom line is the women who stay true to themselves, build a strong track record, and are fortunate to have the support of family and friends, those are the ones that have the most potential to reach the top of their goal. Now, I've shared my experience in this male-dominated field of banking. I've also talked about the changes that we're seeing in leadership and the importance of leading on the diagonal. But I want to share just one story with you before I go, because this was a woman who was incredibly inspirational to me. Her name is Emily Cummins. At the time I met her, which was in 2009, I had the privilege of presenting an incredibly prestigious award to her in London. There's a thing called the London Women of the Year Awards. It's where they recognize the top gold medalists in Olympic sport, the top philanthropists throughout the world, justices in the British system. But the thing about Emily was, she was 22 years old at the time, from Kent, a small village in Kent, England. And I sat at this luncheon with her, much like we did today, and her mother and her father. And Emily was blown away to be in this gathering of 1,000 of the most successful and prestigious women throughout Europe. And her story was pretty interesting. She was the youngest person that had ever been given this award because she invented refrigeration for medicine that could work without electricity, so it could go down into the depths of the villages of Africa and save lives. She did that at the age of 20, out in her back garden with her grandfather, who had a shed that he used to putter around in with some inventions. Now, when women look at me and say, oh, I could never do it, I have too many impediments, I didn't have enough, Emily, she's in a back garden, for God's sakes, puttering around, inventing an incredible technology that's going to be put to use a continent away. She's since been named as, one of the top 10 young people in the world. I don't know how they find those people and figure out who they are, but at any rate, to me was really impressive. But what's most interesting to me is I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in co-mentoring with Emily, because I will tell you, I learned way more from her than I think she did from me. But you know what? Her questions were all the same. It doesn't matter if you're in Sandra Day O'Connor's generation, if you're in my generation, or if you're in Emily's generation. We're all asking the same things. Are we good enough? Can we balance? Are we going to be able to go out there and succeed? And I guess what I would just leave you with here is the questions will always remain, but the answers are yours to go through and to break through and not answer out of limitation, but to answer out of experience. So with that story, now's as good as any time. Make yourself the leader of one. So whether you are a woman in this room pursuing your career, or you're one of the few mighty and admirable men that are here mentoring and giving support to the women that are here, go forth and be a leader of one. Fire your engine. Stay on the tracks and keep moving forward, because in times of uncertainty, best way to predict the future is you might as well be the one to create it. Thank you very much.
Well, those were terrific remarks. Thanks so very much, Deanna. Those are the kinds of inspiring remarks I think that will be useful to everybody, no matter what stage in their lives or the careers they find themselves in. And Doug, just to give you an update, the bumps and bruises are coming out, and I really don't mind, but just don't tell anybody it was an 80-year-old woman that did it to me, okay? I appreciate that. Our fun and our learning continues. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce yet another introducer. And this is particularly of interest to me because she's going to be introducing a New York Times golf writer whose works that I've enjoyed and admired for a long time. And this introducer happens to be Tracy Andrus, a member of the Andrus Center Board of Governors, whom I'm told is probably the second most knowledgeable member of the Andrus family when it comes to politics. She also happens to be an avid golfer, shooting the low 80s. Now, I'm not going to hazard a guess whether it's the governor or his daughter Tracy who is the champion when it comes to golfing. I won't ask that question. Tracy is a longtime member of the Boise business and civic communities, having amassed more than 30 years of experience in the areas of strategic planning and marketing and business development and senior management. She serves on a number of boards in addition to the Andrus board. She serves on such boards as the YWCA, St. Luke's, Blue Cross, which happens to be, by the way, an event sponsor, and we'll talk more about Blue Cross and its supportive role of our conference tomorrow. This is the case of a Bronco coming home, because Tracy Andrus earned both her BA and her MBA here at Boise State University. Please welcome to the podium, Tracy Andrus.
Thanks, Dave. A little bit, those are some of my past boards, and there are some other current boards, but I don't want Blue Cross to go, wait a minute, I didn't think she was on our board anymore. Also, a quick, Deanna talked about, and I think she's left, but she talked about her story with Dad and his memory and being able to go around. I got to tell you, that is a tough act to grow up with. Everybody has a story. And they all involve the fact that he remembers things forever. And I can tell you as a child, he also remembers everything his kids do forever. But he does have a phenomenal memory, and it's been a whole lot of fun to grow up in that family. When I was asked to make this introduction of Karen Krause, I immediately said, absolutely, I'll do that. Not really because at the time I knew much about Karen, but because Dad asked me, and I very seldom or kind of never say no to him. But eventually I got around to asking those questions: who is Karen Krause and why me? Dave's already said she is a sports columnist for the New York Times. So that's who she is, and she'll embellish a lot of that. And I happen to have this love-hate affair with the game of golf, and it depends on what day and which one of me shows up, whether or not I love it or I hate it. And with Dad, we've gone out on a number of occasions, and it depends on the occasion which one of us comes home with the better score. But getting back to Karen, she is an accomplished athlete with USC. She was a swimmer. She said she majored in journalism and in chlorine, so I get there was a fair amount of time in the pool there. But the interesting thing is that since she left USC, she blended those two unique perspectives into her life's work. She's been able to give us a look at a number of the different types of sports that she's covered and the athletes that drive them. I went online and read some of her articles, and it doesn't take long for you to get a feeling for the fact that this is a woman who is as much or more interested in the people that we're watching perform than in the scores that they're putting up. And she gives you a real feeling for being there with that individual and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Most of the people, are there golfers in this room? Okay, well, most of you are going to know Karen as the gutsy female columnist who had the strength of character to address gender discrimination where she saw it. So when she was covering Augusta National and the Masters a year ago, and someone asked her about the fact that Augusta didn't have female members, Karen said, I would prefer not to cover this event again until Augusta has female members. That's the way most of us would feel. We might not all have the courage to say that on the national scale, but she did. And of course, there was a firestorm after that, and everyone was debating whether she should have said it or not. But the interesting thing is that strength of character that she showed just happened to bring about the fact that after, I don't know how old Augusta is, but I'm sure it's 100 years or more, after her comment, within less than 6 months, Augusta National brought 2 women members into its fold. So here's what I've deduced about Karen Krause. She's a superb sports columnist. If you haven't read her work, you should. But more important, she's a woman who has the strength of character to tell things like they are, to call out discrimination where she sees it, and to do, as she so aptly put, to speak to that blue elephant in the room that sometimes rears its head and needs to be addressed because it can't be fixed until it's addressed. Beyond that, she's married to Roderick Miller. She and I both discussed how our spouses are loving spouses, but our mothers-in-law were not very happy about the fact that we have separate last names. So, you know, there are some things. And we bonded over our dogs. She has a dog, Copper, who's a mini Australian Shepherd. And as we all pull out our iPhones and share pictures, there's the current ones on the dogs. Without that, Karen, come up and tell us about your life.
Now I tell you, do I really look that threatening that all these men at Augusta National would get so upset about my presence there? Anyway, so Governor Andrus asked me during the break if I could give him some advice on how to get out of a bunker. Now granted, I've only been covering golf for 2 years, but I thought I had a pretty good answer for him. I said, well, don't get in one. So that's what 2 years on the golf beat has helped me to figure out. It is a thrill for me to be here today. I was telling some of the other amazing women at this conference that I spend a lot of time in a not so unpleasant state of solitary confinement. I am one of the very few women that you'll see out at golf week in and week out. I'm the only female on the print side. There's one other woman who works for PGAtour.com. There are a few others. There's one woman caddy, but only because she caddies for her husband. Other than that, it's a pretty male-dominated sphere. And so I eat my meals by myself. I raise my hand to ask questions, and sometimes my hand actually gets quite tired from waiting to get called on. It's almost like I'm so used to being tolerated that to be celebrated is just such a unique experience for me, so thank you. So Bonnie McElveen Hunter said something really interesting this morning about how the two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day that you understand why. And for me, that day, I'll never ever forget it. I was in 8th grade. I was 13 years old and I was swimming on a team. I had Olympic dreams. I was on a team that swimming, I had no idea, but we were actually very progressive. The boys and the girls swam in the same lanes. If you were faster than the boys, you went ahead of the boys. So I grew up in probably what was the most egalitarian environment I could have imagined without even knowing it. I thought that's just the way life was. There was a swimmer on my team by the name of Mike Bruner, who was an American record holder. He was sort of, in a smaller way, the Michael Phelps of the 1970s. His specialty was butterfly. He was also very good in freestyle. He was on our team. All of us looked up to him. He was a god. Now, I was very, very shy when I was young. I cannot really emphasize in telling this story how shy I was. I was the firstborn of a salesman, a self-made man who had a personality that was larger than life. So I guess it was just easy to sort of stand behind his personality and use him for cover. But anyway, in my 8th grade year, I got assigned a project to make your own magazine. Well, I was really excited about this because I love to write, and I already knew what my magazine was going to be about. It was going to be about swimming, of course. So I came home and I was telling my parents about this great assignment. I was so excited. And my dad said, well, so who are you going to interview for it? And I said, interview? Well, I'm just going to make it up. And he said, no, you're not. How can you make it up when Mike Bruner is on your team? You're going to interview Mike Bruner. I said, I cannot interview Mike Bruner. The very idea of it, I almost fainted. So the next day, with my dad in tow, we go up to the head coach of the swim team, and my dad does all the talking because I'm almost catatonic. And he says, Karen has an assignment for school. She needs to interview Mike Bruner. So this coach, Coach Rose, God bless him, he goes, is this true, Karen? And I said, okay, tomorrow after workout, you stay behind. When Mike is done, you will get your interview. So I only found this next part, years later. That after workout that night, he said to Mike, so Mike, you have an interview tomorrow, so just plan on staying after workout. Well, of course, Mike thought, oh, finally, I'm going to get some attention from Sports Illustrated or at least the San Jose Mercury News, so he was pretty excited. So you can imagine the next day when he gets out of workout and he comes onto the deck, and I've still got wet hair from my workout. I've got my hair in pigtails. I had written out my questions on 3x5 index cards, and I was so nervous. My hands were shaking, my voice was cracking, and I don't know how Mike kept a straight face, much less, didn't give Coach Rose the 1,000-yard stare, but He was so gracious. He answered all my questions as if, I was that person from Sports Illustrated. So I did the magazine, I got an A on it, I was all excited. So right after that, as it so happened, the Olympic trials were taking place in Long Beach, California, and we lived in Northern California. So my dad said, why don't I take you down there? We'll go to the meet. So we did, and I, of course, brought my Splash magazine copy to give to Mike and Coach Rose, because wouldn't they want to see the result of all their efforts? So we go down to Long Beach, and the day before we arrived, Mike swam his first event. It was the 400 freestyle. He was supposed to make the team. He did not. He had a very bad opening swim. And the psychology of sports, especially in the Olympic sphere, when you literally get one chance in a lifetime to fulfill your dream, is that if a meet does not start out well, it's very hard to just keep a positive outlook and not spiral down into these very bad, negative thoughts in a bad place. So that's sort of where Mike was when I come bounding in with my dad and, look, Coach Rose, here's my Splash magazine. So I know you guys are going to think I'm making this up, but I kid you not. I give Coach Rose the copy of the magazine. He does not just put it somewhere where he will never see it again. He leafs through it. He gets to the Q&A with Mike. He actually reads it. In the middle of reading it, he says, Karen, this is terrific. I am going to take this down to Mike right now. He needs to read this. I'm like, okay. So, and then again, I found out the nuts and bolts of this story years later, but he did. He took this magazine down to Mike. He read him aloud his own words, because as only a 13-year-old can, I had revealed much more about my own insecurities in asking these questions than anything when I asked Mike, do you get nervous before your races? And what if you don't feel good in warm-ups? How do you still manage to swim fast? And so Mike gave this answer about, well, yeah, sometimes you don't always feel good, but I don't worry about it, and I don't get into a negative state, because I know all the hard work I've put in will make the difference. I know that I'm putting in that hard work so that I get the result in the end, and I'm confident that I will get the result, because hard work always pays off. So that night, Mike goes out and swims his best event, the 200 fly. He gets second, he makes the team. He is interviewed afterward by the Long Beach Press-Telegram. They ask him, not unreasonably, so you look so awful last night, you make the team tonight, what was the difference? And Mike, God bless him, said, well, there's this little girl on my swim team, and she did this interview with me, and I had forgotten all about it, but my coach made me read it. And her words, reading them, really got me in the right frame of mind and allowed me to get into the mindset that I needed to do what I did tonight. So, all credit to Coach Rose and Mike Bruner in this story, and also to my dad, of course. So, the next day I come into the swimming pool, and everyone on my team, which was Deanna, they said, Karen, have you seen the newspaper today? And I said, no. And they said, you're in it. Of course, I do have one minor gripe with this journalist. He didn't do the extra reporting of finding out, what was that little girl's name? But anyway, so my dad gets a few copies, and we read this, and that was my aha moment. That was my life-changing moment, because I could not believe that me, this timid, pipsqueak little girl, could positively impact this person who I looked up to with all my heart, that I had some role in him achieving this success. It didn't seem possible that words that I put together on a page could do that. And I remember so clearly saying to my dad, this is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to have a positive impact on people's lives. So while others in my generation were getting into journalism so they could be the Woodward and Bernsteins and ferret out, nefarious dealings and bad people, I just wanted to tell people's stories and have a positive impact on their lives. So the story has so many lovely postscripts, but among them is Mike went to Montreal. He won a gold medal in the 200 butterfly. He became the first American to break 2 minutes. He won another gold medal in a relay. Then he went to Stanford. I went to high school, and we did not cross paths again until I got the job at the New York Times in 2005. In 2006, I get this reader email, and I'll tell you later, I have this love-hate relationship with reader email because my first default reaction is, oh my gosh, what did I mess up? What is someone going to take me to task for now? But it was this email that began, you probably don't remember me, but you must be that Karen Kraus from De Anza. This is Mike Bruner, and I just want to tell you how I still, when I speak to groups, talk about the impact that you had on my life and how I would have never won those medals in Montreal if not for you. So I said to him, well, I do remember you. Not a day goes by that I don't remember you. I sometimes curse you because you're the reason I'm in this business, but yes. So we ended up meeting at Olympic trials in 2008 because he attended as a fan. And then I ended up writing about this last year. And it was odd because as much as the story means to me, it means everything. I never had really told it to too many people. So I was just explaining to my Olympics editor why the Olympic trials meant so much to me. And he said, you need to write this story. So I did, and it was just amazing. I think a lot of people thought I really had this incredibly active imagination and had made this all up. But one of the funniest byproducts of it is I got an email again out of the blue from a woman who had been my best friend in middle school in 7th and 8th grade. She said, Karen, I saw your story on Mike Bruner, and it was really great, but I just wanted to tell you that I don't think that was an assignment. I think it was an extra credit project. Because I remember you were really excited about it, but I know that I didn't do a magazine. So when I told my husband that story, he was silent for a couple seconds and he said, that explains a lot. Anyway, so my background coming into journalism was obviously I loved to write. After that encounter with Mike, I just really wanted to tell people's stories and have a positive impact in their lives. Now, I went on to USC. I was a walk-on at USC. Extremely valuable experience for me because I was surrounded by world record holders, Olympic gold medalists, just the best swimmers in the world. I saw every day, I competed with them every day. I always had this image that people like the Mike Bruners of the world, the Michael Phelps of the world, that they were somehow blessed, that they had charmed lives, that they had won some lottery, and that is why they were the way they were. And when I was in the midst of these world-class athletes day in and day out, what I saw was actually the opposite, that many of them had some really deep-seated the neuroses, insecurities. They were driven by things that weren't always healthy. A lot of times their lives outside the athletic arena were a mess, but they somehow were able to find the athletic arena was their refuge, was their safe place. And that when people would say to them, gosh, you're so blessed, or gosh, I wish I could be you, or whatever, that rather than take that as a compliment, it actually was almost their cross to bear, because they knew in their hearts that they were not leading the perfect lives, that their lives were not as glamorous as they looked. And when the other speakers today have spoken about the importance of leading authentic lives, what I realized in my time at USC, where my other athletes there at the time included Mark McGuire, Randy Johnson, what I realized is that these guys are almost, and men and women who were so good in sports, were almost having to be actors and athletes. They were having to portray the image that they thought everyone had of them when it was maybe the farthest thing from what they were feeling. And so when I got out into the workaday world, I was really determined that I wanted to break down the myths about world-class athletes and about any athletes. And I wanted to try to show them with their humanity, and not just their superhuman skills, because I felt like it was important to put a lens on them as they really are, so that if nothing else, to free them of the images that they are having to try to live up to. This has been driven home to me hundreds of times since then, but perhaps most poignantly, a few years ago, I think it was 2010, I sat down with Amanda Beard, the swimmer. I had covered Amanda since she was 14. She was in the coverage area at a newspaper where I worked. So I had effectively seen her grown up. She was like a kid's sister to me almost. So we sat down, and I thought I would do a story on her. She was making yet another comeback. And she really opened up to me and talked about how, here is this woman, she was posed for Playboy, she's on the cover of Maxim, the men all love her, the women want to be like her, the mothers think she's terrific, she's seen as a role model for women everywhere, and she was miserable. There was a time in her life when she was swimming her best where she was cutting herself, she was bulimic. And the crazy thing when you think about this is, here's this woman who's going to workouts with slits on her wrists, and no one ever saw. I mean, you're so exposed wearing a bathing suit, right? So I asked her coach at the time, how could you not know this? And he said, well, you don't see what you're not looking for. And I thought that was just a perfect sort of metaphor for the sports world in particular, or in general, that we build up the athletes, or we see what we want to see, and we don't really see what is really there. So those are the kinds of stories I really feel almost compelled to do. To give you an example of the athlete mindset, 2 days before that story on Amanda was set to run, I get a phone call from Amanda. She's almost in tears, and she said, Karen, I don't know if I really am ready for this story to run. And I said, well, you're the driver, Amanda. It's your story. You've got to be comfortable with it being in print. So talk to me. What is worrying you? And she said, well, if this story runs, then I think people are going to see that, I'm not really strong. I'm not really this macho athlete. And I thought, wow, isn't that an indictment of the athletic machine, that it's exactly what we expect these athletes to be, machines that by showing your humanity, that somehow puts you, that is somehow seen as a negative thing, that people will hold it against you. So I'm constantly reminded, even though I'm many, many, many years removed from that world, of what we're dealing with. I went to my first big break. I've worked at 10 newspapers, by the way. The New York Times is my 10th newspaper. I worked as a columnist at the LA Daily News. It was the first column job I got, and this was a big deal because at the time especially, columns were seen as the high rent section of the newspaper, where that was the most important part. You had the voice of the section. It was a huge responsibility and privilege. So I was a columnist. I got a job as a sports columnist at this newspaper in Los Angeles that was not the LA Times. And the editor made it very clear when he hired me what a gift he was giving me of this amazing opportunity to be a female sports columnist, where there really weren't more than a handful in the country. So I accepted it gladly and with much gratitude, and had so many crazy experiences. The one I love above all is, after one column I wrote, the sports editor received a phone call from a very irate reader saying that I was a disgrace to the newspaper, they should fire me, my views were ridiculous, what was a girl doing writing about sports anyway? And the sports editor said, well, you know, sir, if you leave your number, Karen is really very good about returning calls. She'll talk to any reader who has any problems with anything she writes. So I really invite you to leave your phone number, and I'm telling you, she will call you. So I guess there was a pause, and the man said, well, I think that would be really difficult on account of I was at her wedding. So I went home when I heard that